Hi everyone, I'm back today with this gorgeous wedding card. It's super sparkly, super luxurious, and it has a money pocket inside or a gift card pocket. So this card is not a very quick make. I had about a 3 hours long worth of footage in here to reduce to as much as I can, and this was recorded across a couple of days here and there. So if you see an environment changes, that's the reason. You're not tripping. Okay, so first of all, I'm starting with the bride and groom stamp set from Chloe's Creative Cards wedding collection. I'm going to stamp out this image twice. This is a brand new stamp. I never used it before, so I was really unsure how much pressure and all I need to use. And the first image doesn't seem to turn out very, very clear. So I ink it up again with my VersaFine black ink. And I'm going to add much more pressure onto this second image. And this one turns out a lot better. So I end up choosing to use the second image with the bouquet from the first stamp set, because there's a lot more finer details in that image than the thicker lines where I applied so much more pressure second time round. So this is just the Wow Clear super fine embossing powder I'm using in here. And I'm going to use my Wow heat tool to heat set these. It's always magical how these turn into shiny, plasticky looking pieces. I absolutely love this. I love making embellishments with heat embossing. I do that nearly on all of my cards, and this one can't be any exception. Okay, so I'm taking the matching dies from the stamp and die set, and I'm going to die cut the bride and groom from the second image and the bouquet from that first one in there. So I'm just using some low-tack tape to hold these into place. I don't want this to start moving in my die cutting machine. It would be such a shame having to start all over again. Once die cut, I'm going to add a little bit of a color to the faces and the hands and the arms of the bride and groom. And to do that, I'm using my Tree-Blend marker, the two lighter tones from the first skin blend on the bride, and all three tones, including the darkest ones, on the groom. So I'm just adding a little bit of a color there. I'm really looking at the picture that was on the stamp and die set itself already colored in. So just to give me some idea what way this needs to go. And once that little bit of a coloring was done, it is time to decorate the gorgeous dress for this bride. So I'm taking my fine tip glue bottle and I'm going around the whole dress, applying a lot of glue everywhere except the black lines. I'm trying to stay away from them, so when I add my loads of glitter, the black lines will shine through those as well. So this will all make sense in a little minute when I take my chunky crystallina, and just look how gorgeous that is. Okay, so I'm just going back in little pieces where I may have missed some of those pieces. And here we go. It's just super sparkly. Now it doesn't show as much in here because that glue needs to dry, and it will dry completely clear and it will be so much nicer. I also added a little bit of that chunky glitter to the bride's hair. In here I'm adding a bit of a color to the roses using the coral blend, the medium and the lightest shade of those. I want to keep these real faint colors. I don't want them to be real strong, just nice and subtle. And this was the jade green for the leaves and foliage. And I'm adding little glue again to all the roses. And this time I'm going to use my fine crystallina. So again, it looks a bit dull in there, but once the glue dries, it will dry real nice and clear, super sparkly, and I will include some pictures at the end of the video for you. So for the flowers, I'm using both the meadow flower, a cut and emboss folder, and I'm also using the stamps. With the cut and emboss folder, I've cut out a few flowers using vellum, and it leaves that lovely, gorgeous white embossed detail inside the flowers. You'll see it in a minute. And for the stands, I'm going to be using heat-resistant acetate, which I prepare with my embossing buddy. And the embossing powder I'm going to be using is the white sparkly one. The only one I had in my stash was the sparkling snow, so I went with that one. I think it's a gorgeous sparkling white embossing powder. Now I'm using all 3 sizes in here because I really had no plan at this point which sizes of flowers, how many flowers I was going to be using. So I just went with all 3, and the rest of them can go in my stash. I will end up using only the 2 largest ones, as you'll see in a minute. And the rest of them will be going in my stash, and I will be able to use those in future makes. So here I'm just going to be making some more of these, adding a little bit more of the powder in there, and just going to be heat embossing more sets of these. Once done, I'm just going to hand cut these. It's really easy to fussy cut in those lines in there. I'm trying to keep the lines on the acetate and not cut them away. But if you do, you can always fix that up with a little bit of a glitter. So it's no problem at all. So I'm going to do this to all of these flowers. And now for each flower that I'm using, I'm going to be using 2 vellum layers, which I'm coloring in on the underside with the same alcohol marker I used for the bride's bouquet, and this is the coral blend. So I'm using the darkest shade in the middle of the flower and fading out to the lightest towards the end of those petals. And here I just added a little bit of a white copy paper underneath so you can pick up on all those real subtle colors. So now the next bit is to add some glitter to these petals. So first of all, I'm going to shape them a bit, just pinching them downwards, and then I'm going to pull all the petals upwards a bit. That gives it a lovely dimension. So as I said, I'll be using 2 layers of the vellum, and to both of these I'm just adding random dots of the glue with the fine tip bottle, and I'm going around all those petals and I'm going to be dipping this oh no, sorry, it's not the crystallina, it's the crystal pink that I'm using in here. That's right, it's such a gorgeous glitter. I really love that one. Okay, so I done this to both layers, and layering these up, offsetting them from each other. Now I'm going to be working on the acetate base, and I'm just going around the edges of those petals, and I'm going to be dipping these into the crystallina. This is the fine crystallina I'm using in here. And now it looks quite white, but once it dries clear, it is such a gorgeous glitter, honestly, to use. So I'm going to be adding some of the pink gems from the pink bling box, and these are the lighter colored ones. I'm using the medium size in the middle of those petals, and 2 of the smallest ones on either side of them, if that makes sense. So altogether I used 5 of the medium and 10 of the smallest side gems on each of these acetate layers. So for the card base, I'm using an 8 by 8 and 3/4, which I score at 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to fold and burnish both those score lines. So this will be an 8 by 8 inch card with a 1/4 inch of a spine. I'm going to add glue, but only onto the 1/2 inch tab. Do not add any glue to the 1/4 inch beside it, because that will be essentially the spine of the card. I will need that depth because we'll be adding a pocket onto the inside of the card. Okay, so I'm just removing a little bit of an excess glue that oozed out in there, making sure everything is nice and square. Then I'm looking through the beautiful bouquet paper pad, and I'm looking for this real subtle peachy pinkish kind of a color of the paper. It almost looks like a water wash, but very, very subtle colors. And I'm also going to be using the holographic silver cardstock. It's a mirror cardstock, gorgeous with the colors playing right through it, which I cut to 7 3/4 of an inch squared. And the pink one I'm going to cut to 7 1/2 inch squared. They will layer up on top of each other beautifully. But before I do that, I want to add glitter onto the edges of that pink cardstock. And to do that, I'm using Chloe's chisel tip glue pen and the chunky crystallina glitter. I'm going to go around all 4 sides of this lovely square of cardstock. And then because I'm going to be layering this on top of mirror cardstock, I want to add double-sided tape to adhere this to it. Sometimes when I use liquid glue, I find that over time it detaches itself from the glitter cardstock or mirror cardstock, so I just do prefer using double-sided tape in here. So I'm going to add a couple of strips. I'm going to adhere this to the mirror cardstock, and then I'm going to layer them onto the card base. And to do that, I'm using Cola glue because it's going to leave it nice and strong. I also added a bit of a color glue on the pink cardstock as well between the strips of the double-sided tape. I just cut it out because this video is going to be one of the longer videos as it is. So I cut out a little, just under 1/4 inch of a strip of that holographic cardstock, which I'm going to add to the spine of the card. It's just really to strengthen it up a little bit. So on the inside I will be doing the same, only that way I will be using white cardstock, heavyweight cardstock. So this it won't be visible, but will add a lot of strength to that spine of the card. For the next couple of layers, I'm using the 8x8 blooming border set. The second one done with the straight edge with the stitch details I've cut out of the holographic cardstock, and the third one done with this lovely floral border from heavyweight cardstock, just white cardstock. And I'm going to glitter up the edges again, but before I do that, I apply my double-sided tape. I actually find you lose less glitter this way, okay? So I'm just applying the tape first, and then I'm coming back to the front side of it using a scrap piece of cardstock to keep my lines nice and straight as I can, and going to use the chisel glue tip pen and the fine crystalline glitter this time. So I'm going around all 4 sides of this cardstock. And once that's done, you are left with that gorgeous glittery lacy detail on all 4 sides of that lovely piece of cardstock. And now all I have to do is layer these up on top of each other by removing the double-sided tape, the backing of the double-sided tape that I already applied. And now I'm going to glue this on top of the card base, but at an angle. However, I want to add a little bit of a dimension to this, so I'm going to be using some chipboard pieces. You can of course use foam tape or foam pads or whatever it is that you prefer using. When I'm using or working on a larger area like this, and for stability and also just to be using up scraps from my stash, I like to add these chipboard pieces. They're real nice and heavyweight, and they will keep this card nice and sturdy. So I'm just adding glue onto one side of them, and then again adding glue to this other side, and I'm using the color glue in here. It's an all-purpose glue. It's real nice and strong. I'm just going to add it at an angle onto my card base. Now it's looking already lovely and dimensional in there. So for the next step, I'm going to cut out this gorgeous lace detail heart, and using the lace heart layering die set from the Vedic collection by Chloe's Creative Cards. And I'm using the first 2 dies to cut out that gorgeous pink, very light pink heart. And I'm using a cardstock from Art Studio, which I got not that long ago in the range, and the lightest color in the pack. So I'm cutting out a white piece of cardstock, which I have already attached a double-sided sticky sheet to, and I'm using that exact same die that I used the lacy heart cut out with, the larger one. And then I'm taking the next one up, which is a lovely scalloped edge detail, and layering these 2 together, I'm going to cut out a holographic frame. Just like that. They're from the same holographic cardstock I've been using on the layering of the mats and layers on the front of the card. And for the next step, I'm just going to remove the backing sheet of this double-sided sticky sheet on the white heart, and I'm going to layer the lacy heart on it as well as I can, and it doesn't turn out too bad. It's quite good. So I'm just going to press down on it using that backing sheet again. And now everything that is exposed white in there, it's still sticky. So I'm going to be using my fine crystalline glitter to add lots and lots of sparkle to this heart. It's just so gorgeous. Just stay to the end of this video and I will be adding some close-up pictures and a little footage in there for you. So I'm going to layer these 2 together, but I didn't want to be messing with fine bits of glues in there and then mess up my background in there. So what I ended up doing with that scalloped edged die, I cut out a white piece of cardstock, and I'm going to layer everything on top of this, starting with that holographic cardstock of a frame. And then using color glue, I'm going to add the lacy detailed one in there as well, which I already applied my crystalline glitter to. And now I only have one large embellishment to work with. I don't have to start fiddling with the glue on that tiny frame, and then I would end up messing up my lovely background that I already prepared. So this is just a safer option for me. Plus it gives another little dimension to it. And now we are coming back to these lovely flowers. The acetate layer has dried on it. So now I'm going to pinch those petals individually up and going to using hot glue gun to adhere it to the first two layers of the vellums of these flowers. And I'm also going to add a little bit of a stamen to these, which are from the beautiful bouquet bloom stamp and die set, which came with the Bouquet Builder collection, which Chloe was very kind to send to me as my prize bundle. And I cut these out of white glitter cardstock, but I also added chunky crystalline to those end bits in there, because why not? Who loves glitter? So now I'm just trying to arrange which way this will go on the front of the card. So I decided to use foam pads for this lovely heart embellishment, which I'm removing the backings in here. Also going to add liquid glue to these, just so that leaves me with a little bit of a wiggle room when I'm attaching this heart to the card base. I don't want it to be crooked. I want it to be nice and straight, and that certainly helps because it gives me a little bit of a time to move this around. So this is me pushing it down on it, and now I'm just trying to arrange which way I will be using my embellishments in here. But before I can do that, I have one more thing to prepare for the front of the card, and this is from the Wedding Sentiment Builder set, the Mr. and Mrs. Sentiments. So I'm using both the scripty writing die and the shadow die to go behind it, and I'm using white cardstock to cut these all out with. So there's the Mrs. shadow die and the Mrs. scripty die, and the scripty ones already have a double-sided tape on the front of them. Now, I've left this in the footage in here. I was thinking of cutting it out because the video is kind of a bit longer, but I left it in here because some of you that was watching this might be able to give me some advice on this. You'll see where I go wrong with this in a minute. So I'm just using my fine tip glue bottle to adhere the scripty bits to the shadow dies. And I'm going to be doing the same exact thing with the and sign in here. So now, just before removing the backing sheet from the front of the scriptive writings, I'm using my embossing body just in case a little bit of a glue oozed out or something. I don't want the embossing powder that I'll be using now to be sticking to the shadow die in there, or the shadow die cut in there. And this is where I'm starting to go wrong. It looks so lovely in here. I'm really happy about it. I've definitely seen other creators use double-sided sticky tape with heat embossing before, and it worked fine. However, for me it will go wrong. Now I suspect it's because it's very scriptive writing, very fine details. But let me know, what do you think? Why did this not work for me? Because in here, when I'm going to heat set it with my heat tool, it all starts curling up. See, it all is destroyed. So I'm going to try one more in here, the Mista, but same thing happens. So I have to scrap these, and I go back to the start and I die cut again everything from white cardstock and the scriptive writing with white with the sticky double-sided sheets attached to them. So now in here I'm removing everything from the dies, and I'm going to put the dies back into their pouch because I don't want to be losing them. My table is full and full of everything at this point. So safest option for me is to put them away now. So now I'm going to use my fine tip glue bottle again, and I'm just going to attach these on top of the shadow die cuts just the same way I done before. Except now, once I remove the backings of the double-sided sticky sheets, instead of embossing powder, I will be using silver glitter. This is just glitter I had in my stash. I've had it for years, and I completely forgot about this. So I was very glad to find silver fine glitter in my stash in here to use this. So this turning out real nice and sparkly. I'm quite happy with the way they look. I'm just trying it on top of that heart, and in here it doesn't show very well, but I will add pictures to the end of this video for you all to see. Now I cut out some more of these shadow die cuts, so 2 for each, and I'm layering them up. It will add a lovely dimension to them, and they will kind of sit away from that heart a little bit, and they just look much nicer. It really, really does make difference when you look close up. So now in here, I am arranging them on top of that cardstock, and they look absolutely fantastic. But before I can decorate the front, I need to work on the inside of the card a little bit. I am going to take a piece of that very light pink cardstock from the Art Studio pack, one I used to cut the heart, lacy heart on the front out. Here I tried a bit of a pattern paper, but I didn't like it. I wanted to go with the plain, so I decided to go with that one from the Art Studio. And I will be cutting this down just under 8 by 8 inches in here, just a teeny tiny bit, so it's not sticking out anywhere, but kind of covers up the inside of that card perfectly. So I'm going to be using my color glue to add this and attach this to the back of this card, so the back panel of that card once it's open. And the color glue will make it nice and strong because quite a lot of elements are on the front. I want the inside of the card to be just as strong, so it will stand up nicely once it's all ready and done. So now I'm going to work on the money or gift card pocket for the inside of the card. To do that, I'm going to take a piece of white cardstock that measures 8 1/4 by 3 3/4. And on this piece, on 3 sides, so 2 ends of the long side and 1 end of the short side, I'm going to score down at 1/4 inch and 3/8 of an inch. So 1/4 inch and the next line, the 3/8 of an inch on all 3 of these sides. For the lid of the pocket, I'm going to take a piece of cardstock that measures 7 1/2 by 2 1/2, and on the shorter side, score down at 3/4 inch and 7/8 of an inch. Okay, so the 1/8 of an inch will be the little spine for our pocket that will allow us to put money or a gift card in it comfortably. So now I'm very carefully burnishing the lines on both of these pieces. I'm saying very carefully because there's that very thin 1/8 of an inch of a spine in there, and it's very easy to mess up if you're not paying attention. Halfway across that pocket, I'm going to add a little pencil mark just. And now I'm taking a piece of holographic cardstock that measures 3 1/4 by 7 3/8. And this will fit perfectly, leaving a little white border along the front of that pocket. I'm lining it up, and I'm taking my pencil and I'm adding the pencil mark on the same place as on the white cardstock. Using my little notch and corner cutting tool from Creative Craft Products, which I got from Craft Stash, I'm adding a little finger space to these both layers. Now I'm removing the corners. It's like a little square. All the score lines are being removed. So in here, I just decided that I will be using little magnets for the closure. And first of all, I will be cutting rounded corners to that lid in there. And to do that, I'm using exactly the same little punch tool I created my notches with, only on the other side. It rounds the corners perfectly for me. And then I'm going to take a layering heart die set from my stash. The larger heart I'm going to be using here measures about 3 by 3 inches, and the smaller one is just a little bit under that. So this white one has double-sided sticky sheet on it. For the smaller one, I cut out the pink one, and I decide to send this through the die cutting machine with this lacy cut. Which I used on the front of the card already, but this is a mess. Don't do that. So when it came out of the die cutting machine, it's just missing pieces and all that. Should have thought of this, but I didn't. So I end up sending through the whole heart again, and it comes out lovely lacy die set. So now I'm removing the backing of the double-sided sticky sheet on here, and I'm going to layer that larger heart on top of this. It's going to be quite easy just to cut around the edges on the back side of the cardstock like this. So it's much less mess-free than the first attempt was. So now I'm cutting all around the edges in there. And once that's done, just exactly the same way I done on the front of the card, I'm going to apply Crystallina to those sticky bits in there. So once that's done and nice and sparkly, I'm going to take those two exact same frames or dies again, and I'm going to cut out a little frame for this heart using the exact same pale cardstock. Now you can use holographic in here if you want, but I thought there was enough going on of that on that pocket, so just decided to go with the pale pink. I'm using my fine tip glue bottle, and I'm just going to add lots and lots of pressure to this to make sure that it adheres very well to the glitter, as well as the little bits of cardstock that is in there from the lacy detail. Just removing a bit of glue that is out. And now to assemble the pocket, I am going to add glue to the 1/4 inch of a tab on those pockets. I'm making sure not adding any glue to the 1/8 of an inch, because that will be the spine of it, depth of the pocket. So all I'm doing is the 1/4 inch of a pocket tab I'm adding glue to, making sure it's sticking nice and strong, and then I'm doing the same on the two sides of this pocket, and I'm making sure it's sitting nice and square with equal border on all three sides, on the bottom and on the two either left and right side. And now I can glue on the lid by adding glue only onto the 3/4 of an inch of a tab at the back. I'm not adding anything onto the 1/8 of an inch again. Okay, so now I'm gluing this as down low as I want to. I'm making sure that no pink shows on that little notch in there. That's how low I went with it. The piece of pink cardstock in there measures 1.5 by 7 3/8, and again rounded the corners on the bottom half. And I'm just going to add this lovely heart embellishment now. I'm just marking it with a pencil how far the glue needs to come, and I'm adding my collal glue to it and attaching it to that top flap. Using the larger heart shape die, I also cut out a piece of pink cardstock. So for the magnets, I'm adding a little bit of double-sided tape in here, and I'm adding both magnets to this, adding a dot of glue, liquid glue, to the top of that second magnet. And once I close it, I can see exactly where that should be going. So I'm removing it from there, and I'm adding double-sided red tape on top of both of these. Now these are very strong magnets, very thin but strong magnets. So I know that even with layers of cardstock between them, they will still pull to each other. So the closing will be nice and strong. So now I'm removing just the double-sided tape, and I'm going to glue the holographic cardstock onto the bottom part of it. Now, before I do that, however, I want to add double-sided red tape onto the edges of it. It's because there's so much dimension going on, and there's a spine to that pocket and all. I want to make sure that there will be a very, very good bond between this one and the white cardstock. So once this is done, I'm going to also use my collal glue to add in the middle of that cardstock and just layering it up nicely. Now I'm going to take the pink heart shape cardstock that I already cut out, and I'm going to glue it onto the back of that, so now that conceals the magnet both on the heart and on the bottom part of the pocket as well. That holographic cardstock on the pocket looked quite unfinished, so I took one of the frames from the Blooming Borders die set, and I don't cut out the whole square because I don't need it, just the two ends of it, just like in here. And I'm going to cut them down just under about 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to adhere them to either side of those pockets. So in here I'm just measuring to make sure it's the same length as the holographic cardstock, adding a bit of red tape to them, and I'm just going to add them to either side. And then, as you will see, I still think it's missing something, so I'm going to try to add the heart to the middle of that pocket in there. But the heart that I have already cut out with the smaller heart die that I use proves to be a bit too big. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be taking a smaller die, cut the heart down to even smaller, and I'm going to be using that in here. You'll see it's just in a wee second. See, that one is too big. And this is the smaller one that I had used the dies before. So this one is even smaller than the ones that I used. So I had a double-sided tape added to the back of it. and now it looks perfect. I think it's fantastic. Now, above the pocket in there, I will be personalizing this card with names and the date of the event, and the message will be able to go on the left hand side. And here comes the fun part, my favorite bit of card making, to decorate the front. I love seeing how it all comes together. So in here I'm arranging them. Now the bride and groom was sitting on the right side, or the left side of the card, and the back on the right, the back on the left. I cut out a lot of this footage because there was no point me adding. It's just me deciding really what to put where. So I decided to go with them on the left hand side. And I brought some of those chipboard pieces in just to give them a little bit of a support. Just the same height. It will make them the same height as the heart is just beside them. So first of all, I know that I need to glue the Mr. and Mrs. onto that heart. The flowers are sitting there just to make sure that once I glue them on, they will not be covering up the writing. So I'm adding Mr., Mrs. and the and sign at last. Now those little chipboards, I'm going to add glue behind them. I'm making sure they are not sticking out behind the bride and groom there. So I'm adding double-sided tape to the smaller bit because it's sitting on the holographic card stuck there, and I don't ever want it to move. I want it to stay put forever. So now I'm just going to add glue on top of them, and also at the back of the bride on the bit that will be touching that heart. So it will sit nice and strong against the heart while it's still lovely and dimensional. A bit more of that chipboard just under the skirt part of her dress. And the bouquet. Now, I was thinking of adding a bit of a foam part behind the bouquet, but it looked like it was kind of floating in there. I could have die cut the bouquet out a few more times and layered them up, but I didn't think it really needed it. What it needed, however, was a little bit more green, because I did add the green color into the bouquet. It looked odd just in there. So I decided to take the dazzling foliage stamp and die set and this lovely spray foliage kind of a stamp. I stamped it out on heat-resistant acetate with sticky ink pad a few times. And the embossing powder I'm going to be using here is In the Park by Catherine Pula from Wow. I was sent this in my prize bundle by Wow, and it is such a gorgeous green one on the acetate. Once it melts, it's real subtle color, like barely there kind of color. I absolutely love it, and it's glittery too, so yeah, win-win. So I'm just arranging them there around the flowers here and there. And I'm using my 3D silicone glue, which I was sent by Sticks to Anything. And I do love the glue, but I just have to get used to it. I'm kind of used to using hot glue, and it gives that instant bond, whereas this one takes quite a while to dry and set and all. It's just me having to learn to be patient with it. But so that's what I'm arranging in here, the flowers and the foliage on the bottom right hand side of that heart, and now they are looking lovely. So I have this gorgeous bling box which have these stunning pinks in it, but I managed to open the box upside down, so me as well just empty them into that dish and I sort them out later, taking out only the largest ones of the lighter pinks. I'm adding 3 of those gems into each corner, and I think that just finishes it off perfectly. They are the same color gems as I have on the acetate, only larger sizes. So I think it just ties it all in very well. I absolutely love how this card turned out, so I'm just going to open it here and show you the pocket again. It's gorgeous. It opens up and it closes real nice and strong, even though there's quite a few, there's me showing you how money fits in it. There's quite a few layers between the two magnets, yet it still closes real nice and strong. So for message or personalization, there's room in there or on the left hand side and also on the back. This is an 8 by 8 inch card, so there's a lot of room to write your personalized messages. So it stands up nice and strong. The flowers, I have to be patient with them until that silicone 3D glue dries. But yeah, it's looking absolutely gorgeous. It's the little bouquet for the bride. I think it's stunning. Now I show you some close-ups in a minute there. Just look at all that bling. Once the glue dries clear, there's really so much sparkle. I really hope you liked today's video, and if you did, please give me the thumbs up, and if you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would love to have you here. And if you hit the notification bell, you will get notified anytime I upload new videos. I really enjoyed making this card. Just look at all the crystalline sparkle on the heart too. Like, it really is full of shine and sparkle once you look close up. I wish the video just gave as much of a sparkle back as there is in real life, because it really is stunning. It really is luxurious, a very elegant looking card. And here is a little picture of the box that I made for it, and this is a close-up on the heart, just on the box. So it's quite a big box because it's 8.5 by 8.5 inch, and it's 1.5 inch in height. But there's the card again, and I really appreciate you watching this video. I'll see you the next time. Bye!